And yes, it is today's Tanya, but I dafka didn't tell you it was today's Tanya Perek Nun Beis, because I wanted to see if anybody would notice, and somebody actually noticed. So I'm going to review yesterday we started doing this sheet, okay? And we did until question 68, okay? We did 67 and 68. We did both of them. So let me just tell you what I said yesterday in review. I'll try to do it quick because I do want to move on. I don't want to spend forever on this page. What I said yesterday is that the human body is a mashal for a world. Every human body, every world is like a human body. That's what it is a pikabah. Because nishtal shomhem, the human body is the image of the higher worlds. And that's why it says in Chassidus, based on Kabbalah, when you study the human body, you can understand Hishtalshalus, because we come from there. Yeah? What you have to appreciate is that a world is a ball, is a globe. And the reason a world is a globe is because it's like a fetus. Klas, klilan, gu klas. The baby is still curled on, it's not yet born. When the baby is born, it's stretched out. It's not round, it's stretched out. We have a head, which is above the torso, which is above the lower third of the body. Amongst the aspects that are discussed in Kabbalah and Chassidus about the similarity between a world and a person is the following. Everybody knows that a world has 10 spheres. Everybody knows that a world has 10 spheres. Chochmah, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. Every world has 10 spheres. You all know that. But a world is not only 10 spheres. You know why? Because saying that a world is 10 spheres is like saying that a person is a brain. The 10 spheres are all in the brain. At the most, they're in the brain and the heart. Now, a person who has only a brain and a heart is not a person. He's some cell mass in a petri dish. To be a person, you have to have around that brain and around that heart all kinds of organs, internal organs like the lungs, like the liver, and like the kidneys and all the rest. Then you have to have the bones, and you have to have the muscles, and then you have to have the arms and the legs and all the body parts that allow us to function, the eyes and the ears and the nose and the mouth. And then you have to have skin and hair and nails that protect us. That's when you become a whole person. So the 10 spheres to a world are a brain to a person. When we learn Chassidus, we make the erroneous presumption that the world is 10 spheres. Saying that Atzilus is 10 spheres, saying that person is a brain. Now, a brain is a very important part of the person. Without the brain, there is no person. But the brain alone isn't a person either. Similarly, a world has 10 spheres. Those 10 spheres are very important. Without the 10 spheres, there is no world. But with the 10 spheres, it's not a world unless that world, Yishai, Ezriel, Shlita, here's your stack. It's not a world unless it's surrounded by a body. And the name of that body in Kabbalistai is Levushim and Echolis. Around the Oires and Kalim, the light and the vessel, which are the 10 spheres, and called Levushim and Echolis. Garments, which are considered closer, and Echolis, which means chambers, which are considered a little bit more remote. But a world is like a human body. The center of the world is the brain and the heart. The body of the world is everything else. And the body of the world includes all the body parts, beginning with internal organs and limbs like the lungs and the liver and all the rest, including the external parts. So you have to understand the world, not by eses fetus. Just like you have to stand a person, not by your brain. But on the other hand, the brain is the most important part of the person. Because the brain is the nerve center. Api Kabbalah, the neshama is in the brain. And from the brain it radiates to the whole body, including to the heart, and to the liver, and to the lungs, and to the kidneys, and to the fingers, and to the toes, and to the hair, and to the skin, and to the nails. But the brain is the nerve center. The same is true in each world. Each world has a center. The center of each world is the brain. That's where the Shekhinah rests. So there's 10 spheres Natzilus. That's the brain of Atzilus. There's 10 spheres of Bria. That's the brain of Bria. There's 10 spheres Yetzirah. That's the brain of Yetzirah. There's 10 spheres Nasiyah. That's the brain of Asiyah. And there's 10 spheres Nasiyah Hagashmis. And that's the brain of this world. And we call that brain by a number of other names. We call it Beis HaMikdash. We call it Kodesh HaKadoshim. And we call it Gan Eden. The center of each world is the brain of that world. And in that center is where the Eibishter rests. And because of that center, the whole body lives. The whole world lives. Good morning. Please don't disturb my class if you can help it. And the way a world works is that the Shekhinah rests in the brain. In the Beis HaMikdash, the Eibishter rests. And the Beis HaMikdash has windows. And the windows of the Beis HaMikdash are inverse. They're backwards windows. In the Lashon HaPosuk, Chalein et shkufim atumim, the windows are facing outward, so that the light of the Beis HaMikdash radiates from the Beis HaMikdash to the world at large. So every world is the same model. Every world is the same model. The center of the world is the Beis HaMikdash. The center of the world is the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash is the Chayes of the world. The Elokus rests in the Beis HaMikdash. And from there it gives life to the whole world. Now, the Beis HaMikdash Hagashmi is destroyed. We have no physical Beis HaMikdash. So this world is living on life support from the Beis HaMikdash of Asiyah HaRuchnis, from the higher Beis HaMikdash, which is, as I explained to you in class, the reason why in Zman HaGolus it's harder to see Hashem in the world, because the brain, we're living from a brain from a different world, because our brain, the Beis HaMikdash Hagashmi, has been destroyed. This is what we discussed, okay? I added a couple more points to this model. One of the points to add to this model is that nobody lives in the Beis HaMikdash. You live around the Beis HaMikdash. In Yerushalayim, in Eretz Yisrael, in the whole world, in the what's called Aklimim, the continents closer to Eretz Yisrael, further away from Eretz Yisrael, like America, like Australia, and so forth and so on. And you cannot enter into the Beis HaMikdash. There's no way to go into the Beis HaMikdash. Meaning, if you lived in Gan Eden, lived in El Mabriya, you don't live in the Esespheres of El Mabriya, you live in the world of El Mabriya. And light and life goes from the windows of the Beis HaMikdash out into that world, and that's how you get light and life. You cannot enter into the Beis HaMikdash. You can live outside the Beis HaMikdash, but you cannot live in the Beis HaMikdash. With one exception. In this world, you can enter into the Beis HaMikdash. Why is it worse for a neshama to come down into this world? Because this Beis HaMikdash, which is the basement, Asiyah Hagashmi is the basement, is the only world with actually a door where you can enter into the Beis HaMikdash. And the Gemara actually says, Befedish, Keshem Shabal Lirois, Kach Bal Lidas. We had a mitzvah 3 times a year to be seen by God. Shalosh Pa'ama Bashana Yirah Chol Zechoch, and 1 week is Shavuos. It's a mitzvah, say that I said that 3 times a year, every male had to be seen by God. They come to the Beit and hit the shop, I want to see you. And the Gemara says, Keshem Shabal Lirois, Kach Bal Lidas. When you went into the Beis HaMikdash, you were not only seen by God, you saw God, or you saw godliness. It's something very real. It was a prophetic type experience in the Beis HaMikdash, because in the Beis HaMikdash, the Eibishter lives. The Beis HaMikdash is the brain of Elam, and see Hagashmi, and the godliness is revealed there. The Shekhinah is resting there, and the Kedusha is hovering there, as I keep explaining to you in the various classes. But the only world that allows you to enter the Beis HaMikdash is this world. That's why it's worth to come down into this world. In the higher world, you live in the Levushim and the Echot. You live around the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash doesn't have a door. It only has windows, and it shines light from the Beis HaMikdash to the world, but you cannot enter into the Beis HaMikdash except down here. That's numero uno. That down here in this world, you can enter into the Beis HaMikdash. Numero dos, number 2. When you come down into this world, you do mitzvahs. And the mitzvahs create clothes, garments, conductors. That when you go back to the world from which your neshama came, whether your neshama came from Bria, you go back to Bria. Neshama came from Yetzirah, go back to Yetzirah. Comes from Atzilas. So where's the Aliyah? If you go back to the same place from whence you came, where's the Aliyah? The answer is you go back with clothes. What do these clothing serve? They conduct the light that comes from the Beis HaMikdash to the world. If you live in Elam HaYetzirah and you've never been on this earth, you have no clothing. Which means there's a lot of light shining from the Eibishter to the Nivroim and Elam HaBriyah. And of course, as I told you, in each world there are people and animals. The people are Neshamas Yisrael, and the animals are Malachim. Malachim are called Chayis, animals, for all kinds of good reasons. If you live in Elam HaBriyah, if your neshama was never here, there's an enormous amount of light shining from the Beis HaMikdash to that world, and you don't have any of it. If you come down here, you do mitzvahs, and you go back up there in the same world, but your mitzvahs act as conductors to be able to experience the light that exists in the Ruchni Yudika world. This is more or less what we discussed yesterday. And I brought this all up because that's how we understand this abud. Our maimed is not about the brain and the body. Our maimed is not a Beis HaMikdash maimed. Our maimed is the idea. There's a house which is being held up by beams, and the beams are hollow. The beams are the Beis HaMikdash in this Machon. Inside the beam is hollow, which means you can go from any world to any world. But only if you get inside the beam. If you're in the worlds, there's no staircases, there's just a beam. The beam is hollow inside, and the beams have no doors, just windows. The light shines from the windows of the Beis HaMikdash to give chayes in that world. But the only way to go from one world to another world is to go down to the basement. Because the only place where you can enter into the Beis HaMikdash, and when you enter the Beis HaMikdash, you're inside the hollow of the beam, which allows you to go from the lowest floor to the highest floor is in this world. It's called Yerida Tzeirach Aliyah. So in this Maimeh, we have a mush of a beam. In other Maimorim, we have a mush of a person. The center of the person is the brain. Each world has its own brain. There are a series of worlds. Each world is separate from the world above it and below it. The only part of a world, of Elam HaBriyah, that allows you to go from Briyah to Atzilus, or from Briyah to Yetzirah, or from Yetzirah to Briyah, from Yetzirah to Asiyah, and so forth, is if you can enter into the Beis HaMikdash, because it's at the Beis HaMikdash, it's open. But the Beis HaMikdash is not enterable except in Elam Hazeh. So we go up to the higher world, you can benefit from having been here, but you can't grow. That's why we do mitzvahs on behalf of our deceased relatives, because we're raising them up from a lower madrega to a higher madrega. So that's what we did, Rabbi Yossi, in questions 68 and 67. Please explain the model of this multi-story edifice in mystical terms. How do we understand the relation between the hole and the beams? And I gave you this whole lecture about a person. It was yesterday's class. It davened yesterday's class, and I just repeated it for 15 minutes, which is 15 minutes too long. That the base, the beam, the hollow is the point. Inside that hollow there's a lakus, and that's the only way you can journey from a world to a world. 68. In this scheme, there is something distinctive about living on earth. What is that? Number 2, in this world you go into the Beis HaMikdash. Number 2, in this world you can do mitzvahs. That when you go back to the world from which you came, you can experience the tainug of the asaga. You get schar. What's the schar? You have the garments that allows you to experience the godliness which is in the Beis HaMikdash of your world from the Torah mitzvah that you did while you were on earth. Okay? We're moving on to question 70. Okay? What role do these beams play mystically? 69. In this Maimon, the Rebbe describes beams in Gan Eden. What are those beams? Thank you for that. Thank you very much. 69. In the Maimon, the Rebbe describes beams in Gan Eden. What are those beams? Now, Chavre, it's so interesting. It's so interesting because we use the same Hebrew word. You know how Torah works? Torah has its own language. Modern Hebrew is not Torah. Modern Hebrew is making Lashon HaKodesh into a language like any other. The way Torah works is that the words were written by God. And things that seem so separated are really similar. There's a guy whose name was the Rambam. You ever heard of the Rambam? Yeah, I heard there's a community called Chabad that are into the Rambam. The Rambam has a book called Meir Nevuch. You ever heard of Chabad? You heard of Chabad?
We the only ones into Rambam?
I can hear.
Are we the only ones that are into Rambam?
No. All yeshivas should be rub your hand on the table. Mordechai. Rub your hand on the table. All yeshivas people are into Rambam. But they learn the Rambam the Gemara. To learn the Rambam the way you do, nobody's ever done. It's a very difficult undertaking. And most of us don't do it well. Because to learn Rambam, you have to know the whole Torah. The Rambam's not easy. But you learn it enough times that Rambam a little bit comes to you. And the Rambam has another sefer called Meida Nevucha, Meida HaNevoicha, which people are afraid to learn. For good reasons. I understand very well why. The entire first section of Meida Nevucha, which is very long, is translations of words. Like you use the word amud, to stand, yeah? A person can stand, a stone can stand, a malach can stand, and the Eibishter can stand. So what does standing mean? So the Rambam, as a philosopher, will find you a definition which includes all four. That's what he does. Pedic after pedic. Yosha, what does it mean to sit? Yeah? Hashem la mabel Yosha. By the mabel, the Eibishter sat. Right? Avraham Avinu's Yosha, he's sitting at the door to his tent. And you have a stone sitting. So this is what he shows you how Hebrew words are used in Tanakh. Tanakh, this is not Hebrew, this is Loshen Torah. To mean very, very diverse things, and yet they're brought together because when the Torah uses the same word for two things, they have a similarity. Now, what does amud mean? Amud's a beam. Everyone's got a beam. It's a column, right? You go to the Roman style of architecture, they have huge columns. The front of this building, they have two columns. I don't know if those columns serve any purpose other than being decorations, but they look monstrous. They're massive columns. You can't put your hands around them. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. But amud also means a beam of light.
I can see those right there.
Now, what's the similarity between a beam and a beam of light? There's no similarity. But Torah sees them as similar. Torah uses the same word to describe a beam that's holding up a house and a beam of light which is being shown from heaven to earth. I always tell you the same mashal. When I was a little kid, I think it's a great mashal. We went on bivouacs. We had overnights. Yeah? And when you have an overnight, you experience it the first time in your life. Two things. Number one, you can see stars. It's beautiful, yeah? Which you never see in the city. Because what's called light pollution. And number two, you experience real darkness. You've never been in the dark like you are when you're out there and there's noises. Wow. Huh? So you put on a flashlight. What happens? You put on a flashlight, you have a beam of light. But the beam of light is dirty. It's full of little tiny pieces. And in your mind's eye, you fantasize about vacuuming out that beam of light. It should be a clean beam with no pieces. Just light, no beam, no pieces. You know what I'm talking about?
No, but I always thought of it differently. I always thought of it that the only reason you could see the beam of light is because of the pieces.
Well, the way you saw it, understood it is the correct way. But when I was 9, I was living in Achei Temimim. I didn't know that. And I realized that if you would vacuum out of that beam of light all those little pieces, there would be no light. Because the only reason you're seeing light is because it's hitting those particles. Light is energy, like electricity, which is one of the weirdest phenomena in nature, which was only discovered in the 19th century, and it's the basis of so much of our life today. Without electricity, there's nothing. And the weird odd ad is that magnets and electricity work the same way, which is nobody can understand why. It's just a fact. Electromagnetism, electricity creates magnets, magnets electricity. No one even knew this until 150 years ago, 160 years ago. And electricity has changed our world unbelievably. Unbelievably. And the light is electricity. The difference is only when electricity runs through a wire, if the wire is efficient, it gets to your house and then you use it. Right? When you use electricity up, it's gone. The way electricity gets used is it's translated from an electrical current which is moving to heat and light. If you put on your flashlight, it's electricity that's being translated into visible light, but in so doing, when it hits those particles are translating it into light and they're killing it. It's ending. It stopped being a force. It's being used up, so to speak. It's an energy. It's being translated into a usable form, and it stops being potential energy and it becomes kinetic energy. You're actually using it. You see what I'm saying? So how would you use a beam, a physical column, a pole, and a beam of light? But Taylor says it's the same. You know what the commonality is? Amudim are a mashal for holding up the world. A physical beam, the way Torah understands a beam, is that you have in the Basiligani, Vasisa kroshim la mishkan, Atzei shitim oimdim. You make the beams for the Mishkan out of Atzei shitim. Atzei shitim means cedar wood, Oimdim, that are standing upright. You have any idea how Menachem Mendel here, how big a deal Chassidus makes, not of the word Krashim, as the word Oimdim. The whole Peirik Daled of Basi Lagani and the Maim of Tafshin Yud Daled is revolves around the word standing. Because standing upright is not seen as a physical thing, it's seen as a philosophical thing. And therefore it's also a mystical thing. So what does a beam of light and a beam holding up a house have in common? They're both vertical, they're not horizontal, they're going from bottom to top, and they're supporting the connection between a world and a world. Yes, physically a beam holds up a house. When Torah uses the word amudim, and it uses the word amudim to hold up beams, Torah never meant for you to see a physical house and a physical beam, because Torah is revealing secrets. Torah meant that this physical house, this physical beam, is holding up a mystical house. And therefore a beam made of stone and a beam made of light are the same word.
So I'm guessing 70 is the same answer?
Say that again. I would like you to pay attention and let me do the talking. I know you came at the right answer. I'm teaching right now. You wait. I'll get you what I'm doing 69 now.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm doing no, keep quiet, let me get there. I'm doing 69 now. We'll get to 70, we'll do 70.
So can I
No. In the Maimed, the Rebbe describes beams in Gan Eden. What are those beams? They're beams of light. The question becomes, how do you tie a beam of light to a physical beam? And the answer is, a beam in Torah is never seen only as physical. It's always metaphysical. And now, Pinchas Eliyahu is going to say his piece. Go ahead.
Yeah. The vertical connection between two worlds, that's what the beams of light are doing. I yes, I glanced ahead at question 70, but would the roles that they're playing necessarily be different from them just holding up the two worlds?
There's only one way they're different.
That,
Significant way they're different.
than just holding up the two worlds. That's not the role they play.
I'll tell you what the difference is. Whether you see the beam as holding it up from the bottom, or you see the beam as pulling it up from the top. The beam in Gan Eden is shining down to lift you up. The beams in the Pasuk are standing in the ground to connect you upwards. They serve the same role.
So I've been picturing it, but possibly I wasn't picturing it that it's pulling up. In my head, I'm thinking, pillar, holds the roof up, structure, or whatever, right? And, they don't usually pull you up.
Right. So there's the mystical concept of a beam that connects the floor to the ceiling, and there's the mystical concept of a beam that connects the ceiling to the floor. So the Maimed finds a constant between a physical beam holding up a house and a beam of light shining from Gan Eden. The way, it says in Gan Eden, the Kabbalah, it's about the Chassidus, that when you go from a Gan Eden to a Gan Eden, which may happen as often as 3 times a day, you have to tovel in a mikveh. The problem is the mikveh is made of fire. I'm a chaya. The Gemara says, Ikit filusa benurim. The mikveh ideally is in fire. Now, you can't exactly tovel in fire. Iket filusa, which is the Kabbalah Shas. Iket filusa, the primary tovel in mikveh is in fire. But you can't tovel in fire because you go to the mikveh exactly once, we tovel in water. But Iket filusa benurim. So there's an ahad in Nord, there's a river of fire, that every neshama that goes from the lower world has to go through this mikveh. What happens, this mikveh burns off your old layers, and the expression is, you forget what this world looks like, and you're ready to go into the higher world. But you can't come into the higher world. Then the higher world sends a beam, and lifts you up. Chassidus sees these two things as sequential. One is a Sefer HaBohid, one is a Pasuk. Chassidus joins together different ideas from different parts of Torah and says, when a neshama journeys from a world to a world, has to go out of the old world. It's called toveling in a mikveh of fire. Then a beam shines from the top and raises you up. So in this Maimed, we have beams holding up houses, which are mystical, and beams of light that are raising you from a Gan Eden to a Gan Eden. And they're connected. The beams holding up the house is the Torah mitzvahs that we do, which justify the existence of the world. The beam of light is schlepping you from one world into another world. Anyway, I'm sorry I was so aggressive. I just don't like to be interrupted, especially when someone says, I want to write the answer down so I can move on to the next question. That's really I'm teaching. I'm not keeping score.
I meant it less as wording that question as more as I saw the question and I'm curious what the difference is between the two.
Okay, I overreacted and I really do apologize.
Yeah, it's fine.
Thank you for forgiving me. 71. Inasmuch as the mitzvahs are concerned, what is the hall and what is the kal? Inasmuch as mitzvahs are concerned, what is the hall and what's on the chavre? The Maimer moves on, okay? In the beginning, we see the beam as the purpose and the hall as secondary, right? We see the beam having a circumference, a body, and an emptiness inside. But then we broaden it. We juxtapose the beam against the hall, and the hall becomes the action of the mitzvah, and the beam becomes the kavanah of the mitzvah. More precisely, the hollow inside the beam is the kavanah of the mitzvah, and the body of the beam itself is the ma'aseh of mitzvah. This happens in the Maimed, okay? So I want you to understand that I'm not making this up. In the beginning, the beam has, and that's how it is in Tanya, has an inside and an outside. The Rebbe here broadens it. The beam, which allows you to go from a world to a world, that's the kavanah, and the hall, or the world, is the kiyum ha-mitzvah b'maisa. Okay, that's the answer to question 71. 72, more particularly, the beams themselves have an inner and outer dimension. In Hebrew, it's called pnimis and chitenius of these beams. Please tell me what each of these two represent. And the answer is the body of the beam is the mitzvah, and the hollow inside the beam is the kavanah. Okay, now there's something very weird about this. It is weird. Because when you ask any person who studied Chabad Chassidus, what's more important? The ma'aseh ha-mitzvah, the kavanah ha-mitzvah, they'll say without hesitating, the most important thing is the ma'aseh. Doing it is more important. The kavanah doesn't matter. In this maimed, it goes the other way, as you'll see in the next couple of questions. I can hear you. That's right. Mitzvah is atzmus. You meet a yid, there's no connection to Eibishter, no speeches, no philosophy. Put film on him. That's the Rebbe's whole approach. That's right. Me did you do a mitzvah, and it cascades. I remember I went with my kids to the zoo, so my boys took along that film, and we're on the train, and my son approaches a man. Today in New York City, everybody knows what Chabad is, and everybody knows what tefillin are. They either want or they don't want, but they're not surprised. You know, when you go over, are you Jewish? You don't get insulted. And my son says to this guy, he would like to put on tefillin. He said, I'm getting over at the next stop. So without hesitation, my son pulls out his shalosh. And just do this. He makes a Achei Temimim al mitzvahs tefillin, which we almost never do. The tefillin were on the guy for 9 seconds. He made a bracha, he said Shema Yisrael, and he took him off, and he ran off the train. As he's running off the train, he says to my son, this is the quickest tefillin I ever did. In other words, this man met a Lubavitcher who knows where. And he knew that you meet a Lubavitcher, you put on tefillin. He was literally getting off the train 9 seconds from start to finish, just the sharash and gemacht on mitzvah. What happens is these mitzvahs seek into the bones. And they germinate. They wake up the soul. They ruin their lives. I have a friend who's now passed away, unfortunately. He wasn't that old. He was an elder bachar of mine. He really gave me a lot of time. He had a great influence on me when I think about it. I lived with him Chassidus in 1981. I was 15. He was probably 20. Maybe he wasn't that old. Anyway, so he told me a story that he was a bach in yeshiva, and in Israel it's different than in America. Israelis are much more cynical than Americans, but they don't mind putting on film. Israel has one advantage over America. You know what the advantage is? You don't have to ask the offensive question. Are you Jewish? Which is so difficult. Skipping that question is huge. Kim White tefillin, Rabbi Ratchik used to say, would you like to put on tefillin? So you get on the bus, and pretty much everybody put on tefillin. I mean, they don't necessarily believe it, but they'll do it. They don't mind. So he told me it happened to him in the 70s, when he was a young boy, a little bit after his bar mitzvah, and he got on a bus, an Egged bus, and he asked him to put on tefillin. The guy starts to curse him. Gets really, really upset. In Israeli style, you know. Not Israeli style, Israeli without the style, just Israeli. Okay, so he's also an Israeli. So he goes to the next guy, you know what I'm saying? And the next guy starts putting on tefillin. So the first guy starts screaming at the second guy, you shouldn't do this is a cult. He has this vendetta against Lubavitch. You never heard. Anyway, he makes his rounds. And when he finishes, a bus ride in Israel could take a day and a half. He goes back to the guy who got so upset. Says, listen, I understand you don't want to put on tefillin. Well, why does it bother you if I put tefillin on with somebody else? He says, you don't understand. He says, I met one of you 3 months ago. And I made the mistake of putting on film that one time. He says, the chazer shlingt sich nicht darab. I don't keep kosher. And every time I eat, I feel bad. You ruined my chazer. So I have rachmanis on the next guy.
You ruined my life.
Mom, you ruined my life. Put on film. Favos. It touches the neshama. That's the Rebbe's whole inyan is miftzayim. The Rebbe holds, you come to eat with no Yiddishkeit, and you want to wake him up. You give him a philosophy. That's what you're talking about. You put film. You wake up his neshama. The Rebbe Rayatz had a story. It's a long story. That I was hoping to finish the sheet today, but I'll finish the class with the story. We'll finish this tomorrow. That they brought to the Rebbe Rashab a bunch of letters that were officially from the Baal Shem Tov and his Talmidim, the Maggid and his Talmidim, a sacred collection of letters, hundreds of letters. They found in a treasure, in an archive. The Rebbe Rashab took the letters and divided them into two piles. These are authentic and these are inauthentic. And I'm assuming inauthentic means that they were all copies, they're not original. And they were copied very quickly. Some of them were copied so quickly that they no longer reflect the original. That's what I'm assuming. He made two piles. These are good, these are not good. Anyway, they took the same pile to the Frierdiker Rebbe. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, during the lifetime of the Rebbe Rashab, was even a bigger nista than our Rebbe was after the Frierdiker Rebbe. People thought the Frierdiker Rebbe as a businessman, as a great organizer. And the Frierdiker Rebbe made the exact same piles. The guy who brought the letters to Frierdiker Rebbe was doing it to test him. And the Frierdiker Rebbe looked through the letters. These are good, these are not. And when he finished, the guy says, you make believe that you're a businessman. I want you to know, I gave this pile to your father, and he divided exactly the same. Exactly, hundreds of letters. So don't play game of Pashat Yid. This is Ruach HaKodesh Gola. It's open Ruach HaKodesh. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, no, they're not okay. He gave a simple explanation. He says, a Yid is Getlachkeit, a Jew is godliness. A Chefzer Shel Kedusha is Getlachkeit, a holy artifact is godliness. Getlachkeit to Getlachkeit tzitzich, godliness and godliness as a magnetism. So if I picked up the letter and I felt the pull, I knew it's Kedusha. If I picked up a letter, I didn't feel appeal. So the guy said to the Frierdiker, I don't know if that would work with me. I don't know why. I wasn't a Jew. But